Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk Astrology. In today's episode, we'll be exploring the topic of astrological magic. Joining us today, we have esteemed astrologer, cosmologist, and astral magician Michael Ofek, who has been practicing astrology and magic for over 20 years. So thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today, and how are you doing?
Thank you, Callum. I'm doing good.
Wonderful, wonderful. So our first question for you today is that how would you describe astrological magic, and particularly for those who are uninitiated?
I'm going to answer with a question, if that's okay. With a question to you, if that's okay. Why do you study astrology? What is the reason you study astrology?
That's a really great question. I think it's to get deeper within the rhythms of the cosmos and the relation to our lives here on Earth, and to get a richer, deeper feel into not only into the traditions, but essentially what it means to be a human being, and to learn more about not only our individual selves, but our collective consciousness as a whole.
Thank you. That's a beautiful answer, and it goes to the heart of what I believe astrological magic to be, in a sense, because it might be a little bit of imposed separation, but what does it mean to live by astrological knowledge? Your answer was beautiful because you said it's to understand the cycles, the rhythms, the principles by which that govern the manifestation of phenomena internally and externally. But in a sense, astrology is a little bit more on the diagnostic side, right? It charts the dynamics of the sky, but it doesn't give you a lot of tools to navigate these currents in your life. Although, astrologers do use the tools of prediction to help clients do more wise choices, based on their natal chart and the possibilities that are coming up, and so in a sense, this is a sort of astrological magic. If you tell a client, you're having this coming up, so maybe you should do this action or that action to maximize that potential, or to mitigate the challenging aspects of that, etc. So then you're becoming proactive. You're not just sitting there passively, like a doll on a string. So in a sense, astrological magic is the proactive side of astrology. It's if astrology charts you can say the notes of the cosmic music, it's astrological magic that teaches you how to play the music, or navigate and strum those chords, at least as much as possible. And Mercury doing its stuff. Yeah.
I love your connection with music. And as you're saying, if you're working with clients and you're looking at the astrological weather coming up, and if you play it to the terms of music, sometimes in life we have those discordant moments, and we're trying to navigate those choppy waters, and those sounds that don't resonate. But also we have those nice, lovely chords of the musical tune when things are going well. We get clients who come to us where there's a bit of discord in what's going on. That's usually a time of crisis when people come to us.
Yes. I take this analogy very seriously, in a sense. And I think this was also at the roots of astrological magic. I'm speaking about the music analogy because, at the end of the day, everything vibrates, everything is in constant sort of an harmonic convergence, or I don't know if that's the right, there are sort of rhythmic beats for the different music, the different planets are, playing, you can say.
Some sound a bit sweeter than others.
Yes, of course. And so it's a big orchestra. And sometimes it's more harmonious, sometimes less harmonious. But it seems that there is a deep, compelling need to get in sync with the currents, the cycles, the waves, these beats. So you have different scales of beats. You have your daily beat, you have your monthly beats, you have your yearly beats, and you have your whatever 30 years beats, etc., etc. And of course, all the different synodic relationships and their own sort of equivalent musics. And so in a sense, I feel that if we take this analogy for a minute, and I'll also show you some slides that maybe take that back into its source or some of its sources. Learning astrology helps you differentiate the different tones. And when those tones play, they play within and without. We don't have to differentiate inner and outer right now, but sometimes we react to a situation and we get into a certain emotional state. Sometimes it sort of comes from within. Sometimes it's both. But something that is pretty obvious if you follow your own transits or even the monthly cycle of the moon is that there is a changing quality in your state. And when I say state, I mean the general state, which includes emotional, includes mental, includes physical in a sense. We take this as roughly the 3 realms of experience, although there are more, but these are sort of the basic ones, right? So in a sense, if we take the philosophical assumption of astrology seriously, then there is a cosmic sympathy always in play, if we like it or not, it says, right? So as Plotinus says, everything breathes together. So it's unescapable that every feeling we have is in some way in participation with something, consciously or unconsciously, with something that is in the ambient, that is happening, that is in correlation to something rising or setting, or or sort of a planetary contact, or many things can reflect that. But when you have the astrological knowledge, then you can start differentiating those different emotions, those different states, and start calling them by their names to a degree. It's okay, this is a martial state.
Right, right.
Or this is a Venusian state. And they each have, corresponding expressions, corresponding symbols, significations around us that can help the state, how can I say, can help modulate the state, or lower its volume or increase its volume, or so it's a little bit like some holistic therapies, like Ayurveda, and other holistic therapies that speak about pathology as an extreme of a certain state, for instance. So let's say you have a tendency for heat. If you increase that heat in excess, then you have a heat pathology that can, come out in many ways. It could be ulcers in your stomach. It could be, infections. And so in order to mitigate that, you do things that cool it down. You eat cooling foods. You don't push the heat to its excess point, in a sense. So that's sort of an allopathic perspective.
It's a beautiful description, and it's that harmonious, trying to bring everything back into balance, and you're using that elemental terms as well. So too much excess of heat, or too much excess of water or coldness, and trying to find that balance that we're all, I think, striving for in our carnation here on this time in the planet.
Yeah, I think, I think temperature is a good analogy, because we always look for the best temperature, in a sense, right? So if you're too hot, then you'll open the AC. If you're too cold, So we're always looking for a state of equilibrium. Now, philosophically speaking, that's for instance, in a very seminal work of Plato, which influenced astrology for centuries, and probably much of the doctrine is somewhat based on this philosophy, was the Timaeus. And in the Timaeus, Plato describes how the soul, after the demiurge, the creator God, has made the soul and sort of put it in a body and put it on earth. So the soul is in chaos, because it's pushed and pulled by the circuits of heavens. That's that's my words, but that's how he writes it.
It's a wonderful description.
So you say, in a sense, the young soul, it doesn't know how to maintain or balance these. So in a sense, it's pulled by the aggression of Mars. It's pulled by the desires of Venus. It's pulled, so it loses its equilibrium. And what Plato says is that the more it grows, the more it wants to get in sync and sort of align with the orbits, with those cycles. And then the discord starts, lowering down, or
absolutely.
And so in a sense, this is, I think, one of the most essential sentiments of the ancient world, the need to get in alignment with the heavens.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you see that in ancient monuments all over the world, really. They're all aligned with constellations, with rising and settings of fixed stars, or heliacal risings, or directions, or solstice, or
And in a way, in our current contemporary modern society, do you feel like we've become disconnected in a way with that ancient way, that connection again to the cosmos, and how we again find that equilibrium? It seems like we fell into this very overly scientifically materialistic worldview, and we've kind of disconnected ourselves, not just from nature, but from, again, the rhythms of the cosmos. How does that feel to you?
Well, you're speaking my mind. It's really that, I feel that deeply, this disconnection. And I think this is part of the reason why magic in general is having a revival, and astrological magic is having a revival, and astrology itself is having a major revival.
Absolutely.
So I think there is a deep calling back to that recognition of this intimate connection that we, this inborn intimate connection that we have with the luminaries and planets, and, of course, with nature and the earth.
Yeah.
In a sense, there's a beautiful quote from D.H. Lawrence in his Apocalypse. He says, "We have lost the cosmos. We don't live within it anymore. We've separated ourselves and neutralized this connection. And now we feel lonely, deep inside, because, science cannot replace that deeper, soul
Absolutely.
connection. It done a lot to harm it. Although I don't think that science is the problem. I think there's need for a certain remarrying of sciences, you can say.
Absolutely, and obviously having its place, but maybe we've gone too far in the extreme where we've seen now the more of that nihilistic feeling that a lot of people in many societies have, where we've lost the meaning, as you say, the soul and that connection. We might have this dry, mechanical, scientific worldview where again that nihilistic feel of, well, that's it, there's nothing else, there's no soul, there's no connection. And I feel, as you're saying, it seems like there's a revival coming back to this. Like, let's find our connection, let's get back to the source and the soul and energy of where we should be again. So I think it's wonderful the work you do, and your part in this part of this revival as well is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you so much. Well, I think even without the magical, the deeply complex magical system that we call astrological magic, even just accepting astrology sort of connects you back into a worldview that that the cosmos is a living being. Everything is living, and this is the basis of most of the ancient philosophies that were the grounds for astrology. It's a living cosmos. And that's why it's intelligently ordered the way it is. And going back to the music analogy, part of the reflection of this intelligent order, for instance, Pythagoras, he was defining the harmony of the spheres. He postulates that there is a sort of a sound, a vibration that is below the threshold of our hearing, that is always projected upon us from the movements of the planets. And the harmonics are so beautifully geometrically embedded in one another to maintain a perfect, almost perfect order, and that how can I put it, that sort of puts everything in its place, and protects it from just chaos, everything sort of
and I love that description. If we come back to the astrology, so looking at your own natal chart, you're seeing where there's harmony, where there's discord, and then not only have we got that, we've got the living, breathing cosmos. As we see, as we have our own self-awareness, then we're thinking to ourselves, what's coming up next? How do my energies interact with what's coming up? So again, the astrology, that tool for self-awareness, but not only for self-awareness, but for preparation for what might come up. So for me, without having astrology, I feel like I'll be walking through life blind. And I think that's the love I have for astrology, and the way you're putting it is wonderful as well.
Thank you. Yes. So in a sense, astrology lets you see the invisible powers that are at work, and part of the definition of magic, and we can go 4 hours speaking about the definition of magic. Part of the definition is working with unseen powers or unseen forces, in a sense. And this is what shies out from the rational mind. Although physics also deals with unseen forces to a large degree, and is very abstract in its mathematics, and but still, it is. It's very hard for it to rationalize the things it doesn't understand.
Mm.
So in a sense, it looks only at places that it can, define, articulate, measure. I'm going to digress for some small story. My father used to tell very bad jokes, and this is a joke that I remember because it has a beautiful punchline, which is relevant. A guy was looking for something below a street lamp.
Mm.
Another guy comes to him and says, sorry, what are you looking for? Can I help you? He says, I lost the key to my house. So he said, where did you lose it? He said, I think near my house somewhere. So why are you looking here? So he said, because here there is light.
Says like I can see. That's a great
So in a sense, science looks only where it feels somewhat secure that there is light over what he looks at. And, it's not. He cannot look at the shadows. He cannot look at the invisible, in a sense.
I love that. I love how that the connect. Absolutely, absolutely.
And this is what the magician does. It maintains the bonds with unseen powers. We can call them many names. Maybe the most universal one is spirits, and or different shaping principles of nature, which are not readily available, not readily apparent or visible to differentiate. But they are deeply, deeply embedded in the structure of our lives, of our reality.
Yeah.
And in a sense, that's the power of the magician. So again, astrology gives you a way to differentiate and understand these powers that compose the world, from the most universal to the most complex and specific.
Absolutely.
And astrological magic gives you very practical tools to navigate your way around these powers and draw them and direct them. But in essence, I would say astrological magic is the art of alignment with the cosmos. Even before the directing and creating with it part, the first thing is to align, because there needs to be an agreement, in a sense. So I like to say in simple terms, there's an agreement of wills, the individual will and the cosmic will,
I love that, yeah.
So a good analogy for that is, if you want to move in a certain direction in the water, and you also have the wind at your back, or a wave that is carrying you to that direction, then you don't have to to put on a lot of effort.
Absolutely.
If you go against the direction of the wind, then you need to put a lot of effort, and there's no promise that you get where you want to head.
Sometimes the current's too strong. It'll take you in the direction anyway.
So in a sense, even in popular astrology, when you speak about what are the good things to do under a Mercury retrograde, for instance, is a sort of the same sentiment of alignment. This is the cycle now. This is where it's the way that it that the currents flow. So if you wanna lower the suffering, then you have to go with that flow and do things that are in correspondence with it.
Absolutely. And I think that's the advantage astrologers have. So let's take the beginning of this year. People who may not be interested, they may be thinking, well, why are my actions? Why am I not getting further ahead? It's a new year, 2023. Why are my actions not taking place? And of course, as we know, we've had the Mars, Mercury retrograde, we've only just started going direct. So people might think to themselves, without maybe the astrological knowledge and the other knowledge you're talking about and being aligned, they're thinking to themselves, why am I not getting ahead? Why am I not getting going? And again, as we know how to plan around all these different currents. And as you said, if you're trying to swim against the current, I mean, that might not work out. But if you know what might come ahead, that's going to help out. So it's been a sluggish start to 2023, but I'm hoping we can start eventually get into the swing of things and into the flow.
Yes. And if we're speaking about simple analogies, a very sort of accessible analogy is the analogy of agriculture. Today, with technologies, men can sort of bypass but let's say in more ancient times, there are certain seasons by which you can sow certain, fruits or vegetables or whatever, and you can't change that on your own whim, in a sense. You have to do what is supported by the season. So the more you understand the cycles of the seasons and the moon, etc., then you know how to maximize your crops. So in many ways, this is the same thing that an astral magician is doing. And we can also sort of differentiate, a couple of levels of this work. And, the hallmark of astrological magic as it is known today is the creation of talismans. But I would say that astrological magic is much more than that. It's much more than that. And I'm not trying to minimize, the potency of talisman creation, but I think in the talismanic theory, there are deep points or deep principles on how to, in a sense, draw these powers and connect to these powers consciously. In you can say in life in general, or as an art of living. It's something that you do constantly, not something that you just make a talisman and and forget about it. Or
right.
So this is something that I put a lot of focus on my approach. Is the maintenance and communication, you can say, with these powers, and in a sense, the talismans, they are acting as mediums or as means to an end, but truly the end is having the connection without any object, having an internal natural connection, in a sense, because the connection is there, if we like it or not. It's just becoming conscious of that connection and knowing how to activate it and how to make what I call receptacles, which are sort of the talismanic principle of something that takes in the effluences. So you can make receptacles for receiving planetary energies in many ways in your life. It's the way you set the space already is, already pulls a certain energy. And of course the times of actions, which is of course the electional aspect,
Absolutely, yeah.
is in a sense one of the most magical branches of astrology.
Absolutely.
So in a sense, what the action you do becomes the talisman, to a degree. It's the beginning, it's the birth of something. So you start a business, or you whatever action you do, if you do it in agreement with the planetary power that is that corresponds to it, then you align your will with the will of the cosmos, in a sense.
I love that, and how you bring it out the will, and then the will with the cosmos as well. Wonderful, absolutely.
And we are deeply disaligned. We are affected, but we're disaligned because there's the saying, man plans and God laughs.
I like that.
There's so much disalignment in our culture, in our institutions, in the way we plan things. We don't think of cycles. We don't think of riding the waves. We don't think of them. We plan something, and then we feel frustration when it's not moving as we would like it. Because,
and I think that maybe speaks to, in the last few years, again, the revival and the astrology coming to the zeitgeist at the moment, because you go back to 2020 with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and everything before that for 10, 15 years, 20 years, fairly, with a few discordant moments, but really in the last few years, collectively, it's just been an earthquake, and everyone's going, what's going on? Like, institutions are faltering, our connections with other countries, wars, all these kind of things. So I think a lot of people are going, okay, let's try and maybe connect to the cosmos again. Let's figure out what is going on, and again, align our wills with the will of the cosmos, because everything's just going to shit right now. So
yes,
there's a real revival, for lack of a better word.
Yes, and I think modern man needs a big dose of humility, and a big dose of how can I put it? Remembrance, in a sense. It's we're in amnesia, and learning something for the Platonic school was anamnesia. If you're learning something, you are sort of remembering it, because all knowledge is in some way or form embedded within you, because it's the blueprints that your cells align to make up your body. If we speak about sacred geometry or numbers, or all these stuff are sort of embedded in your own computer, in your own system, even if it's not conscious, or can be consciously articulated. So we're all made by these laws, or by these rules, and in a sense, I think that, and that's an important point, and maybe I'll show some slides. I call my big course, which is reformatted somewhat for Kepler, but I call it core astrological magic, because I think the first step that needs to happen in order to really appreciate our connection to the cosmos is going back to the core, in a sense. And that's also, we can speak of that in many philosophical terms. But when I say core, I speak simultaneously. I speak about the past, but I also speak about the core that is present. Because in a sense, origin is always present. It's always with us. That's kind of what the philosopher Jean Gebser was speaking about a lot. It's always an unfoldment from an origin. The origin is simultaneously existed, and getting to the origin. And if we see that linearly, so if we go back in time, we sort of strip away a lot of the coding or a lot of the layers that has been added throughout the years. So the more we go deep or into the past, we go to the direct experience, the experience of something as it is, and not as you project it to be because of your intellectual knowledge, in a sense. That's has been blinding us to a very large degree.
It's a wonderful point.
Iamblichus is, as a philosopher and theurgist, he was the pupil of Porphyry, and he was sort of going against philosophers, saying that, excuse my French, but you're masturbating with words all day, You're philosophizing every point and just
so convoluted and over the top, right?
and where we want to go, in a sense, you can't enter that with discursive reasoning. You can't enter that with thought. You can only enter that by a certain ecstatic moment or a certain how do you say, like expansion of consciousness to a degree where you stop trying to articulate what you see and being in a presence of something, being what Surawadi calls knowledge by presence. So in a sense, we all have that innately within us, but the gradual neutralization of that connection by the risen of the intellect and science and mechanistic thought, that had made that separation, bigger and bigger,
more acute. Absolutely.
So accessing that state becomes harder. So Iamblichus says you are.
I think it comes back down to that sense of humility, and that was a key point I think you made before that element of coming back to being more humble, and again having that humility without our intellect trying to charge into everything and trying to, again, it comes back to that disconnect. So I think that's an excellent point you're making. Absolutely.
Yes, so that's why I always try to bring back that core, because that sort of realigns us back to something that is innate within us. You don't have to have a manual to do that, but of course we do today, in a sense. But still, we have to hold the direct experience as our guide, because the other way is just taking for granted a lot of sayings of other people, to a lot of things that we take as true, but we'll never certainly know they're true. The only way that certain things in astrology work is that you have an experience of them. You observe them, you experience them within you, and after a while, you start losing the doubt.
Right.
There could be, some doubts about some, approaches and interpretations, but that the reality of that connection, if you do astrology long enough, you lose that doubt completely.
Absolutely.
And that comes from a direct experience of that to a degree. Now, so the first instance is the what I call the primordial experience, and that's kind of a nostalgia for a time when there was no light pollution, and and people would experience the sky in all its awe and glory, and there was no there was no light sources except for maybe fire.
Exactly. But again, it goes back to that point of that disconnect where we were. Oh, sorry, my camera's gone off again.
That's okay.
I'll make that point. Oh, let's bring it back. But again, it comes to your point about that disconnect where, ancient times, even if we had the light of the fire, it's still that natural connection. And again, without that light pollution, now we have 24/7, it's synthetic light cities where, again, we've lost that connect, and we're up on our phones up till midnight and losing our connection with the natural rhythms of the cycle, natural rhythms and the cosmos. And as you're saying, the primordial experience and trying to reconnect into those powerful energies.
Yes, it was sort of a given, that you would know where the moon is, because you were, in a sense, you were relying it for, for light in the nighttime, for example. You would see every day, you would see certain stars rising and certain stars setting. And then you can understand all the mythological tradition that is the stories that are connected to the night sky and how it was animated and how it was alive for them. It's for all those cultures. And there's a nice quote here. Sorry. You should extend an empty mind towards the intelligible in order to comprehend it, since it exists outside of the mind. And I think this is from the Chaldean Oracle. So it's important to understand that the mind would look under the street lamp, and in a sense, we should know how to put the mind aside and have a direct experience of a presence, of something, that a phenomena that is revealed to us. And in that sense, it also speaks to us. Because a rational mind is editing many things out. It's always sort of how do you say, sort of aligning to the narrative of what of consensus knowledge of certain things, etc. So in a sense, the intellectual discussion about something tends to distance us from the very thing we are discussing. It's sort of that
Absolutely.
loop thing.
Yeah.
And we need to know how to shut down I call it the simultaneous narrator. It's like in documentaries when you have that voice,
a voiceover and tune it down.
The voiceover, right. And just accept the unique presence of what is revealed to us as it is.
Absolutely.
So that's sort of the first, I think, posture or that we need to look at the magical experience. And from that point, we will always realign to that core. Because as magic developed over the years, not only astrological magic, it became more and more elaborated and more complex, and very, very intellectual,
right?
And very, very rationalized. So in a sense, you have so many intricate rules and symbols and things that you lose the fact that that this connection already lives within you. So I'm not against all the techniques and different, this. But I'm saying again, we need to realign with that center. And part of my argument is that the roots of astrological magic comes from what we term shamanic cultures, shamanic, or maybe later paganic, but these were more animistic cultures. Although astrology has also been born to an animistic perspective in a sense, right? This is just some of the points of of different ancient characters and motives in classical antiquity that gives us feel of our tradition. Orpheus, for instance, was said to be the son of Apollo, which was a Thracian god in a sense. It came from Hyperborea, really, from the stories. He's not even a native Greek god in a sense. And Apollo is a sun god, and Apollo plays the lyre, right? Apollo has that lyre, and he gave Orpheus his lyre. Interestingly, the lyre was built by Hermes in the Greek story, with a turtle's shell. But then you have this element of music coming up, that we spoke about before, because the magic of Orpheus was his music. Through music, he could control the animals. He could, tempt the gods. The gods gave him passage to the underworld because of his music. So he would, in a sense, he bewitched with his music, and he's sort of there are other interesting characters, but he's sort of a central shamanic, ancient Western shamanic archetype. And there are a lot of researchers and historians that show the sort of shamanic influence on these cultures, and the shamanic motives in Egypt, in Greece, in Persia, coming from Phoenicians and Nubians and Hittites and Stygians and Chaldeans. They were all sort of wizards, priests, shamans, magicians. It was all sort of coming from the same root. But interestingly, with Orpheus, he was really the father of the mystery cults. That later was also associated with the Dionysius and other gods and semi-divine figures. But part of the Orpheus story also shows first instances of ritual magic. There's descriptions of making an altar and putting certain things from animals and burning sort of some instances and doing all this stuff, and there are other historians that say even that Orpheus was a sort of astrologer also. That's interesting that comes about too. Now I can not bypass this thing. I won't go through all this list, but speaking of Orpheus, there's an interesting thing because Orpheus had a lyre. Let's see if I find the slide here. 1 second. Everything is slow today, huh? Yeah. Orpheus had a lyre, a 7th stringed lyre. And the seventh string is associated with the 7 planets and the tradition of the 7 vowels, which are the different vowel sounds. Each planet has an associated vowel. There are different traditions to that, but this is sort of the basic one. And part of the more theurgical rites to the planetary deities were by pronouncing the vowels. Some even say that the name of God, you could say, is the 7 vowels articulated together like sort of a song, sort of a music. I sort of reconstructed that a bit, but this is not for this talk. Sure. But here you have a beautiful correlation between the analogy of music and one of the first archetypal shamans or magicians in the Western world, that we still today use the Orphic hymns in planetary rituals in order to invoke the planets. So in a sense, the hymns are the prayers, are the sort of getting into that ecstatic mode of invoking that connection. And the musical thing is also very very prominent. If it's humming, if it's singing, but again, this sort of correlates with the aspects of the harmony of the spheres. The Apollo with the lyre, or Orpheus with the lyre.
This is fascinating. So we've got the planets there, the vowels, the Greek musical notes, and the pitch. I mean, this is beautiful.
Yeah. There's a beautiful quote on astrological magic coming from John Dee, which is pretty nice. So I'll put it here. If my computer would respond. All right. Yeah. The entire universe is like a lyre tuned by some excellent artificer, whose strings are separate species of the universal whole. Anyone who knew how to touch this dexterously and make them vibrate would draw forth marvelous harmonies.
How beautiful is that? Wonderful.
Yeah. So same analogy, and it comes from probably even intuitively, because it's sort of accessible if you think about it, but it comes from that tradition. And this is a quote from the Picatrix, and this sort of drives something home, which I'll explain after I read that. In order to successfully engage any planetary power to benefit your affairs, it is necessary to call upon its spirit and become knowledgeable about the nature and resonance of each planet's influence within the microcosm. Thus, one will become acquainted with each planet's colors and smell, become physically sensitive to its resonances by consuming the food associated with the planet, associated with the plants and animals falling under the planet's influences.
Wonderful.
So, in other words, first you need to hear the music. That's what astrology gives you. And the more that you can sample it, in a sense, sample the state, sample the emotion, sample the energy, then you can also start to play, because you can generate those states. And when you do an astrological talisman, for instance, you have to be charged with the music that you'd like, to impart on the talisman. So you need to know which music is associated with which planet, and the combinations and stuff, and know how to consciously consciously play them from within, consciously animate these forces to draw them in and align to them. And this is the basic laws in music, right?
Absolutely.
The law of resonance. If we take a string that is tuned to a certain note, and you strum it, and there's another string near it, it would also vibrate,
right?
Even though you don't touch it. Right? So in that sense, it's kind of that new age sort of, which is pretty old age, but that likes attracts like. So in a sense, playing a certain music, and that we know that just by simple experience. If you play certain music, it gets you to a certain state, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's the fastest gateway into the beauty. Again, I can listen to music all day, every day, and I think it comes back to your point again about you strumming that note and the invisible, the frequencies and the resonance hitting the other strings as well that we can't see. So I think it builds into the discussion and the thoughts you were having before, and I think it's beautiful analogy. Absolutely.
And if you take that more widely into the art of living, you can say, so this is the way that you tune your instrument.
Absolutely. I love that.
Because in a sense, everyone has its own key to the cosmos, and then that is its own natal chart. So in a sense, everyone aligns with the cosmos differently, based on its own cosmic reflection, you can say. So that's the natal chart itself.
We are all walking talismans.
We're all walking talismans, living talismans of a certain moment that it's still vibrating within us and having these, how do you say, ripples, throughout space and time.
Yeah.
So, sorry. So, in a sense, this is the essence of astrological magic, and that was a bit spontaneous. The putting so much emphasis on the music analogy, because you can look at it from different analogies, and one of them, which is very, very, very essential, is the analogy of light. And for some of the people that has been following, my work would know that I spent many years trying to articulate the role of light, or the philosophical structure of astrology as based upon the phenomena of light, vision, and reflection. And I sort of reverse engineered most of the astrological concepts to an articulation of light relationship, light and vision. So that's, I think, the central paradigm, or the central phenomenon by which astrology was articulated. And the physical light is said to be an image of a non-physical light. And much of the ancient astrological magic texts speak about the rays of the planet, the light of the planet, the astrological light or etheric light, which is, in a sense, a non-visible sort of light that moves through everything and is not, how can you put it, in a sense, it is so subtle that it is in the structure of our biology, the structure of of the field, the electromagnetic field by which we are embedded in.
Absolutely.
And again, I'll draw up a nice quote, this time from John Dee, which is much later. But I think I put it here somewhere. One second. Yeah, it's.
Excuse me.
That's okay. I'm just picking and choosing certain slides from my
Wonderful.
collection.
I love it. Yeah.
So the rays of all stars are double, some sensible or luminous, other of more secret influence. The latter penetrates in an instant of time everything that is contained in the universe. The former can be presented by some means from penetrating so far.
I love that.
So the former, you can put a wall and the sunlight wouldn't get in. But the less corporeal or more essential electromagnetic force, you can say, or the more subtle astral light is penetrate in an instant of time everything that is contained in the universe. It's a beautiful quote.
I love it.
So this is the real nourishment. This light is really what maintains life, and what is emanated, in the ambient by all the sun, of course, takes a biggest percentage, but
I mean, and that's why we talk about, again, the luminaries and the lights being such a fundamental part of astrology. And again, the sun obviously generating the light, the moon reflecting, and this kind of all tie is beautiful. Yeah, I love this quote.
Yes. So that's another very, very basic paradigm in astrological magic, that we're really dealing with that spiritual light in the sense of non-physical light, which is animate, which is living, which is has a motive, which every planet is sort of an ambassador of a certain potency of light, which essentially is reflected from the sun. And that I argue this in my reconstruction of the light principle. Essentially, all planets are reflecting the sunlight. So in a sense, they are sort of, you can say, deriving a certain essence and from the sun and becoming the monad, or that the one that is responsible for the expression of that derived power.
Yeah.
But if you turn off the sun, then all planets lose their power.
Absolutely.
So if you can articulate almost all the astrological language in terms of light, then in a sense you can understand also the effects of this light to a degree.
Absolutely.
And that was rationalized by many philosophers. El-Kindi is probably the most known in his book on stellar rays, by which he explains everything as emitting rays. And this is the way things affect each other. Things in nature also emit their presence. They emit their rays. This is why, in a sense, they're even visible. So that's another sort of paradigm. Now, this is important because this light, also called fire, in a sense, the ancient were speaking about this as what is composing our soul, our noima, our life energy, is that light to a degree. So we are made of it.
Absolutely.
And so in the sense, the natal chart is our own light signature. is the special blend of light, and certain planets had more luminosity, certain planets were drawing their presence stronger, more visible, more magnitude of light, and this is imprinted in our soul. And this quality, or this planet for instance, is more visible in our mind, and is also more visible in the way we behave in the world.
Absolutely.
So in a sense, astral magic is also knowing how to sort of stand in certain rays.
Absolutely.
And draw a certain astral light, draw a certain potency, a certain planetary spirits, a certain life. So that's another dimension to the analogy of music, because in a sense it's kind of, it's light and sound.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which are really the fabric of the universe is made of light and sound. Both sort of the wave factor of expression in time space.
Absolutely.
So I can speak a little bit about what is a talisman, if you think that's appropriate here.
Sure, absolutely. Yep.
So just some basic things for that's kind of a really 101 to really basic,
right?
For people that never touched the topic. Essentially, astrological talismans are objects magically consecrated to draw planetary power for the achievement of a certain purpose. This is the condensed definition. It's even sort of in the name of the talisman. It says the etymological aspect of it, which I won't get into because it's a little bit complicated. But there is the telos. Telos is the end of something. It's consecrating something for a certain end, right? Because you wanted to do something. It's an expression of your will for something to become, to manifest in your life, right? So the creation and consecration of the talisman is done on specific astrological times, of course, and this is part of what makes it an astrological magic, and using the corresponding materials or images. And for this, of course, we have the whole doctrine of correspondences, because every planet has its corresponding family of herbs and stones and certain colors and smells and numerical values and geometrical shapes and so here are some instances. You have the type of stones, metal, herbs, oils, etc. The images, the symbols, their proportion, number, shape, color, the place, and the atmosphere. If you want to draw Saturn, you'll have a certain space. If you want to draw, let's say Jupiter, you'll go to a different space, ideally.
Absolutely.
So it could be different places in nature, or it could be changing the setting and the atmosphere of your, the place where you do the ritual.
Absolutely.
And the smell, taste, music, clothing, number of candles. You see very somewhat funny even descriptions of talismanic rituals that the mage would dress as a woman, for instance, for doing a Venus talisman or something.
Right.
So it's a little funny, but it helps in the more things you bring in that corresponds to the significations of the planet, the more complete, in a sense, the ritual will become. So in a sense, it's a little bit fake it till you make it kind of thing.
I like that.
If you want to feel like a woman, okay, so put clothes of a woman. And of course, and this is, I think, even more important than all the rest, is the mental emotional state of the magos. What I call psychological mimicking or focused intention. And this is something that in the course, we will go really deep in, because that's something that I've developed for many years. Ways by which one can enter certain states based on my own studies in Andean shamanism and different traditions that put more emphasis on the direct experience. So how to sort of align mentally, emotionally, physically with a certain planetary energy in order to really, draw it within you and create through it, create with it, charge with it.
Absolutely.
So it's you can say it's sort of channeling a certain light. And of course, we have the words, the incantations, invocations, petitions, which are powerful on their own. So all of these together sort of converge into the birth of the object, which is fashioned as a body or as a vessel for that planetary light or energy or spirit. And in a sense, it's an equivalent of a birth chart. So, being born under a certain chart, you have a certain destiny or certain, so it draws on that because that's the origin point of the.
It has its own snapshot in the sky, its own creation point. That's an excellent point.
And then you add this to your, surrounding, to your body, so it becomes a totem in a sense of that energy. So it helps increase it. It helps, pull in the that quality into your life. That's really the essence of talisman making. Now, every aspect of this process has a very rich, or at least some aspects have very rich philosophical and cosmological basis. For instance, the whole aspect of the image making, comes from the philosophy of the image. That is part of the Platonic and Neoplatonic tradition of how the world is a succession of images. Each layer imaging the layer above it, you can say, if you look at it as a hierarchy, So in a sense, you can say, and that's said in the Hermeticum, Corpus Hermeticum, the body is the image of the soul is the image of nous or the mind, nous is the image of the sun is the image of the one, etc., etc.
Right.
These are all like reflections of higher, principles. So therefore, when you play with images, you draw down certain light. This is sort of how it's explained. And something that I like to say as a good example, you can't have an image of a beautiful woman without Venus being present there.
I like that. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if she's busy or not. She needs to come. She needs to be there.
I love that. Fantastic.
So these draw them in, and you don't have to use these only in ritual. You know, if you put pictures of things that are images that have a certain Venusian potency, then that would increase in your home. You know,
absolutely.
So this is sort of the basic element of talisman making, which is when you start to interpolate it, you gain a lot of insight on how astrology works.
Right, absolutely.
And on how to participate in that work. And of course, one very basic philosophical principle that astrological magic is based upon, although I take it much, much, much deeper in the course, is what is called hylomorphism, or the matter and form doctrine of Aristotle, which is sort of his take on some of Plato, and he doesn't agree with Plato on many aspects, but this is a quote from the Picatrix. The effect will be as you desire, insofar as the matter and the form are conjoined into unity, the way a figure of a man is united with the mirror or water, or as the unity of spirit and body.
Wonderful.
So there is that form of the planet, which is the uncorporeal potency or spirit or light, and there are the materials in the world that carry its image. So in a sense, when you compile these and make a body for it under a certain time, also imparting the charge through you, then the creation gets the life from that planet to a degree. It's intensified, and it projects that effluence to a degree. So if we build upon this, then many things in our lives, can become vessels for certain needed or wanted potencies that are associated with certain planets or certain configurations. And that's, I think, also an important aspect. You can stop me and
oh no, I love this. Wonderful descriptions. Absolutely.
Thank you. And this is something also I think is very important, because many texts on astrological magic focus on the what can be called desire magic, in a sense, right? Desire for power, desire for attracting women, desire
fame,
for
wealth, all those
success, wealth, etc., which are valid desires. I'm not saying they're not valid. The only thing I'm saying that is not a very good practice is everything that intervenes in another person's life, or manipulates, or of course, doing negative things too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's more of a coercive aspect of magic. And there's also more coercive aspect to the or perspectives to astrological magic too, as coercing a spirit to do what you need, or demanding it to do what you need. So in a sense, my approach in that way is a little bit of more of this shamanic sentiment of in the Andes they call it Aini, which is the reciprocity. It's giving and taking, in a sense. It's coming with humility, coming with more of a devotional aspect, making these powers as allies, as partners, as co-creators, as friends, but not something that you would demand or,
absolutely, yeah,
coerce.
I say it boils down to intention. So again, removing that element of manipulation or demanding or those kind of, again, negative connotations. I think that's an important point.
Yes, and and there's something important also that I think we should touch upon, which is there is a different aspect of astrological magic, which is sometimes pushed aside in modern uses of it. And the first instances of it was really the theurgical aspect, theurgical rite. Theurgy is translates as God's work, but it's more of doing the work of the gods. Doing the work. Not only talking about the gods, which is theology. So theurgy is doing the practical work of the gods, in a sense. And the tradition of the Sabian astrological magic was really an astrological religion, in a sense, or astrological mystery tradition. But it was aimed at transcendence. It was aimed at perfecting oneself. It wasn't aimed at earthly desires, which again, I don't invalidate. Yeah? Everyone has them. But a big part of this tradition is in a sense, it's more of a psychic sort of magic. Psychic in the sense of psyche as a soul. So it's perfecting the soul. And by aligning with these powers, one, again, balances, harmonizes, mitigates, sort of finds the middle ground between its own polarities in the chart, for example.
Right.
Between and also, making talismans or drawing potencies to modify one's character. So you see that also in text, but a little bit less. If you want to become courageous, for example, then you need to work with Mars, for example, or the Sun. If you're too aggressive and you want to sort of lower the aggression, then you need to work with Venus and draw, her energy to soften your temperament.
Aggressive edges.
So in a sense, it all comes to the doctrine of virtues, in the sense of character virtues or soul virtues. And a lot of, astrology, of course, is connected to that. But that's why we have the 7 virtues and the 7 sins, One of the oldest texts that we don't have, but supposedly written by Hermes, is called the Anarratus, I think. Not Anarratus. I forgot the name in Greek, but it means the virtues of the character, in a sense. And this is the text where Paulus Alexandrinus says he quotes the 7 Hermetic laws. So there was a tradition of, a philosophical quest of refining one's character, refining one's soul, refining the alignment with the cosmos, and by this, gaining how do you say, like gaining a connection with demiurgic powers, gaining connection with creative powers, and consciously participating with them. So the wealth and health and all these stuff are a byproduct of that. That's what the Iamblica says. When you do that, you'll get all the others because you will be fully aligned. So you'll be fully, the powers will flow within you and give you their presence. So I think that's an important perspective on astrological magic as a mystery tradition and as a way of transcendence. And when I mean transcendence, I don't mean living this world.
Right.
It's the contrary, really. It's making the spirit more present in this world.
Yeah, I love that description. Absolutely.
Doing the work of animating the powers that wants to create within you and wants to be part of you and wants to, in a sense, have a link to the material realm.
Absolutely.
So you ground yourself in the body, you ground yourself in the earth, and you draw these energies within you like an electrical circuit.
Wonderful.
You take away everything that inhibits the flow and maximize the potential.
Wonderful. I love that description.
So I can go on and on. We need to...
I love this. I love how deep we're getting and going into it. Maybe we'll end on an electional chart that you have.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Wonderful. Let's talk elections. All right.
Wonderful.
So
I could listen to you for hours. Like if you were just imagine now in a Greek city and we can all just sit around in robes and.
Oh yes, you should do that. Okay, so some basic things about elections. So I differentiate or look at election in a hierarchy from the universal to the specific. So there's, for instance, when a planet is in a sign where it has essential dignity. The whole time he is in that sign is a good time to work with him, in a sense. It doesn't even matter from that universal perspective. It doesn't even matter if it's now rising or setting or anywhere. If it's there, it's time to draw on it or connect to it as it amplifies its signal at that time more so. But then when you reach the angles, which is the alignment of that planet, for instance, with an angle, let's say either the 1st or the 10th, which are the strongest, then you align it with the Earth and with your location. So you have sort of a double, so you have that, not only the potency of the planet being in its own sign or its rotation, but also in the foreground of that time, so sort of dominating that moment and channeling.
Again, not only have you got the potency of the planet domicile, you've got that angularity, that extra oomph and that extra power. And if you can get those two together, it's going to make a huge statement, it seems.
Yes. So then it aligns with the Earth in a sense, that moment. So it's in the foreground. It's what is rising or what culminates at that moment.
Right.
So in a sense, you can say its music is now being played in the radio at that moment. So it's more specific to that window of time. And in the tradition, there is also, if we get to the more specific, there is also house-based elections. So the most simple elections are planets and angles. That's simplifying it, of course, or stars or signs.
Right.
But then you also have house-based, which is a little bit like reverse engineering a horary question. you know, instead of just saying, is she and I going to date, or are we going to be lovers or something? So you find the answer you'd like. For instance, the planet ruling the first house is applying by a trine to the planet ruling the seventh house, and they're both mutual reception. Okay,
right.
And then you do, a talisman or a petition or a sort of a magical ritual in that moment. That's a house-based talisman. So you have even Tabit Ibn Korah has in his on images. He has a lot of these house-based talismans. For instance, if you want to gain how do you say, the love of a king or the respect of a king, so take the ruler of the 10th and put it on the first. Of course, dignified and everything. Or if you want the king to bring you money, take the ruler of the 10th and put it in the second house.
Right.
Or you can take it from there. This is the house-based elections, which are one of the most complex of magical elections. And maybe the most complex of all is the personal elections, which are based on your natal chart. Because there's always many things happening at the same time, and it's a kind of an alignment between a good universal election and how it is personalized by its placement on a personal degree. So in a sense, if you have an alignment of a certain planet, very dignified on the MC, and that MC falls on your ascendant degree, that's very specific for you. It's very powerful for your chart.
But conversely, if you get to a point where there's discord or disconnect with the universal specific, maybe looking at changing that as well on the inverse.
Yes, well, there are sort of disagreements of what is more important. My experience is that the alignment with your chart would be more important in general. But if you do a universal election, even without taking how it affects your chart into consideration, you would still get a very powerful talisman. But the more it is specifically fashioned to your chart, the more it will strum your strings. If you take again,
I love that. The more that should be a quote in itself. The more it strums your strings.
And if you look at ancient, electional rules pertaining to individuals, so in a sense, they for instance, one of the rules is taking the ascendant degree. At the day that you would like, that there is an occurrence, or if it's financial matters, then you take the second, or etc. through the topics of the houses in your chart. That's another way to do it. So if it's career things and you want to put maybe the sign of the MC rising, for instance, your sign of the MC. So that's the more complicated one. Now, so the most basic alignment, and this is really, really basic stuff. Yes, it becomes unbelievably complex if you go deeper into electional rules and the moon, etc. But really, in simple terms, we want to have an alignment between a planet, the Earth, and the moon. If we have these three, then we really have the chains connected to each other, because the moon is a translator from the upper realms to the sublunar realms. So he's a translator. He's the vessel by which the astral energy flows into the earth. So if you have the three of them, then you have a very powerful chain. So you want to have the planet in a good, powerful, essential, and accidental dignity.
Yeah.
You want to have the lunar power connected to the planetary power, and you can also take into consideration the phase, the contact of the moon to that planet, the essential and accidental dignity of the moon, plus what I call association, which is sort of the analogical symbolic aspect.
So for maybe, again, those who are maybe not initiated, why could you explain the importance of the lunar power, maybe in more depth? Why, again, in terms of condition, aspect, why is that such an important factor?
Well, the moon is the fastest heavenly body and the closest to the Earth. And it's in a sort of a unique position as a mediator between everything that comes, from around the Earth. And because it's connected to the natural cycle, the ebbs and flow of the sea, in the Hermetic cosmology, they would say that he's regulating the elements, because the elements are below the moon in the ancient cosmology. So he's sort of the doorkeeper, and because the moon in its essence is something that takes the impression from the outside, as he lacks the light of its own, it reflects the light of the sun. So it is sort of looked at as a shapeless substance that takes the shape of everything it comes in contact with, and like a mother or like a womb is impregnated by these powers and carries them, and sort of shows how it is embodied in matter, sort of reflects how astrological energies are embodied or put, because the moon also has a lot of association with the body in ancient astrology. So it's sort of embodying these powers and translating them to the world of phenomena. And I think it's the lunar aspect in every one of us is also that receptacle, where we put our mind aside and we sort of become that lunar receptacle. This is where we can sort of get the impressions without the distractions, sort of. Just become that well, you understand.
Yeah.
So the moon is unbelievably important in any election. And of course, in event charts and horary charts and of course also in natal charts. But for instance, in horary chart, moon not only is a co-significator of the current, he's also the flow of the question, in a sense. It's sort of how it is and where it's going through. It shows you the dynamic of the unfoldment of the question or the event. So you'd like to have the moon either conjunct or having a good aspect, and also you would like to have the moon without any disturbance from other planets or malefic
or
contacts or this kind of thing. So
and as you said, as the fastest moving body, like pulling up that picture and telling the story in a sense. And I think that's a wonderful description.
Yes, it's kind of it's really a big transmitter, it's a big medium that, like a satellite dish, when you put it on a certain planet, it takes its emanation and draws it to it. It's kind of magnetic in that sense. It draws it to it and sort of converts it into the world of the elements to a degree.
I love that.
Of course, you can bypass, to a degree, you can bypass the moon and put the planet on an angle, and and there are also rules if the moon is problematic and you have to do it at that time. So you want to, put the moon aside as far as possible. Put him in the 12th house if it's
right.
But let's say the most ideal alignment, in basic terms, is the planet, the moon, and the Earth.
Right.
So if you get the three of them, that's a really, really good start. So here I put it simply, also in a different way. You want to have the planets, what the ancient call in the chariots, which of course it's essential dignity, but it can also be, it's triplicity terms, phase or decan, etc. The more, the better. And then you have the lunar alignment. So that needs to be connected to the planet, either by body aspect or rulership. And so it could be both,
Right.
So if you can't have the moon in connection to that planet, you can put it in the sign of the planet that you're looking, to make the talisman.
So this becomes a dispositor. Yeah.
Yeah, because it also amplifies its signification through that sign.
Right.
And the Earth, of course, is the alignment of either the angles or the good houses, or an aspect to an angle from a good house, either the 11th, the 5th, the 9th, although his circadian house is also trining the ascendant, etc. And the planetary day and hour. And the system of planetary hours, it's pretty easy to, it's in every software.
Oh yeah.
Every I don't know if I'll go into that. That might take a little bit, but we have planetary days of the week, right? So every sunrise, it starts the hour of that planetary ruler of that day.
Right.
So the sunrise of Sunday is the first hour is the hour of the sun, and then you go by Chaldean order. And the measure of the hour is not 60 minutes. It depends on the length of the from sunrise to sunset.
Right.
Or the planetary hours of the day, and from sunset to sunrise.
Right.
So it's in proportion to the amount of daylight, etc. So that's also an important factor, but I would put it as the least important in my own approach. Some people put it higher. Of course,
go through the main points first, and then if that seems to coincide, then all the better, but not as prominent.
You can make compromises with the hour and the day, in my experience. Although if you have a ruler of the hour which is an antagonist of that planet, then but if it's a friendly planet to that planet, and he's also situated well, that can substitute if you have a really good election. Otherwise, then that could be a compromise. And there so maybe one more or two more slides, and then we show an election, and then
sure.
We'll finish for today. So this is the three of them. Let's say we're choosing for Jupiter. So you want to protect Jupiter, the moon, and the Earth, which is the rising sign, or the MC or whatever, from you know, accidental afflictions. So, for instance, from squares or positions from Saturn and Mars, you know. I also put the outer planets as you know, potentially can have a malefic effect to them, sometime more, sometimes less, also depending on other things. And the sun could be, you know, if it's in the combust or you know, these kinds of accidental affliction, that could also be a problem. So you want to protect the planet, the moon, and the angle from accidental afflictions. And then you want to and these are other potential afflictions, you know, slow moving, retrograde, conjunct a malefic star, being in a bad house, etc., etc. So these are some of the things you would
out of consideration, out of sect, like you say, cadent, out of sign, all those things. Yeah.
Although, you know, some of them are really, you know, not that important. For you know, for instance, sect. This doesn't seem to be that important, although it's a plus. You know, it's a plus. If the planet is also in its own sect, it's a plus. But combust is a problem. You know, slow moving or retrograde is a problem. Again, depending on, you know, your intention from the talisman too. Yeah.
I won't be doing any Mercury work today.
Yeah, for instance, you wouldn't do a talisman for today, probably. So this is an example of an election from my last astrological magic course. And we did a talisman together for this election. This was on the 27th of April. And here you have an alignment of, you have Jupiter in Pisces on the 27th. It's really the 28th degree, right? But it's pretty close to being in the degree, which is also the exaltation degree of Venus, which is interesting. Jupiter and the moon is applying to Jupiter on the midheaven. It's in the hour of Jupiter and the day of Venus.
That's a beautiful connection.
Sorry, the day of Mercury.
Got the applying, you know, the chart ruler and coming together. And again, the importance of the angles there. That looks beautiful to me.
Yeah, it was a really really powerful moment, because it was a combo of many planets. It wasn't only Jupiter, but you also had Venus, you know, exalted in Pisces, also conjoining Jupiter. And Jupiter and the moon are also both rulers of the rising sign. You know, moon by domicile and Jupiter by exaltation.
Right.
So they both, you know, having a rulership of the rising sign. Both are aligned with the MC. Both are conjoined. And you can see also other things.
Is that Mercury there at 0 Gemini, or is that I'm trying to see with my eyes?
No, he's in the 27th degree of Taurus.
Oh, 27. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the path.
Yeah. Interestingly, he's also you know, sextiling Jupiter. But you know, Venus is the ruler of Taurus, so he's also the ruler of the sun, the ruler of Mercury in that in this chart. And of course, not everything is ideal. It never is.
Sure. I mean, you've got
Mars, some people
outset malefic in the mix, but again, Venus separating. I mean, 19 and then 23 degrees, so moving away. But again, that's an important point. You're never going to get the most, you know, perfect election or auspicious time. You have to have some sort of negotiation I think, with the cosmos.
When you start playing with this, you would see that you can go, you can step year by year by year by year, and you won't get a good Venus and Taurus, ideal election, or Venus in this, because there's always something that, that potentially can block the energy or something.
Especially if you're working with the slower moving planets, I mean, the time it would take to do, you just got to do the best you can, I guess.
So you can't be a perfectionist, but you can, and this is my approach at least, that it's much more important to have that psychic connection. Psychic, I mean the soul connection, the noetic and psychic connection with the planet. And because in a sense, you go into a garden and you want to pick up a certain fruit. You don't want to pick up every fruit that is growing there. So, you align with the intended signification. You align with the intended power. So, you don't need to worry about, every other planet in every other house. It's the election is opening the channel, opening the portal, or in a sense to access the planetary energy. So of course you want to aspire to find the best election you can, but there's always a compromise, and we have to work with what we if you're looking for ideal elections, you can wait a couple of years sometimes to have. So part of the practice is also cleaning the signal, in a sense, through what you focus on. Because if you play that music strong enough and connected enough, then all the other, distractions, they're not part of that. It's not what you channel, in a sense. So this is an example of the talisman we made.
Wonderful.
And also in this, course, we will make a talisman together in the part 2 of the course.
Yeah, wonderful.
So this is a hands-on kind of course,
I love it.
And what I showed you now in the election part was really, I made this, it becomes much, much, much more complex if you go on to the details of, every significator and, and the rules